the architecture tour on It's a Boat Tour. It's at 3 o'clock, and I just want you to see this line. You have to book this in advance and be here like at least half an hour in advance. This is a line of a couple of hundred people. So if your child basically does not like to sit in line, you better book this and get in line like half an hour in advance. Just look at this line. It is amazing. Look at this. This is the Trump Tower. We're in Chicago. And this is for the architectural tour on this boat right here. So an amazing amount of people are sitting in line for this. Look at the line. By the way, this is a Cyrano Cafe, and it's inspired by Monet, and even the bathrooms are basically named for the toilet of Monsieur Monet, and this one is Madame Alice Monet. So it's kind of a whimsical attitude. Anyway, so this is the line for the architectural tour, just endless. This is Autistic Globetrotting reporting from here.
Joe, who's the deckhand, is letting you on. Also, downstairs, the most important members of the crew are Jason and Jose, and they're the bartenders downstairs. So feel free at any time during the ride to go downstairs, check out our bar. It's a full-service bar. Anything you imagine a land-based bar we do have downstairs. Special today are Bloody Mary, Raspberry, Vodka, Lemonade, Super Margarita. We also have beer, wine, soft drinks, water, and some munchies as well if you're feeling peckish. Also, downstairs, we do have restrooms. Anybody know what a restroom's called on a boat? A couple mariners on board. Yes, the heads are located on the starboard side of the boat, which is the right side facing forward. These heads, starting right now,
terracotta tiles, pretty much the same material as a clay flower pot. In this case, it has a white glaze on it, so the rain is supposed to keep the building clean. It was formerly the headquarters for the Wrigley Company, no longer the case. Designed by Graham Anderson Probst and White in a historic revivalist style. The building, they said, was inspired by the buildings of Europe during the Renaissance. And in fact, the clock tower is based on the Peral de Bell Tower in Seville. And now just to your right-hand side, there's a building with an American flag at the very top. It looks like somehow a part of a Gothic cathedral landed on an office building. This is the Tribune Tower, completed in 1925 by New York architectural firm Hood and Howells. The top is pure neo-Gothic. The middle of the building is more contemporary with 1925. It's a style we call Art Deco. And if you want to see pure Art Deco, skip over to your left-hand side. Just before we go under the bridge, there's a narrow building that has a dark base. It's 333 North Michigan Avenue. It is pure Art Deco by John Holabird and John Root from 1928. We'll see more Art Deco buildings, but what to look for are those bands of stone going straight up between long, narrow, dark windows. The DuSable Bridge. It's a Trunnion Basco bridge completed back in 1920, designed by Edward Bennett, who co-authored with Daniel Burnham the 1909 Plan of Chicago. And just after the bridge, I'm going to focus on the left-hand side to begin with. We have a building with a little Roman temple all the way at the top. It has a grand entrance. This is the old London Guarantee building, completed back in 1923, designed by Alfred Auschuler. This is an example of what we call Beaux-Arts. It's actually a French interpretation of neoclassic architecture. It was created at the L'École des Beaux-Arts, the School of Fine Arts in Paris. So this is an American interpretation of a French interpretation of a Roman interpretation of a Greek building. Stripped to its essence, steel and glass. That style of architecture was popular in the 1950s, 60s, into the 70s, but by the late 1970s, people were beginning to weary of that style. It tended to look the same no matter where in the world it was built. It was called the international style. And it was also very simple, even austere. So there was a reaction starting in the late 70s into the 80s, and we call that response post-modernism. And we have good examples of what we're talking about over on your left-hand side, just after the bridge. The first building is a dark stone-clad building. It has two flights coming out of it. It's on your left. It's 35 West Wacker. This is the home of the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency. They came up with the Pillsbury Doughboy, the Tony the Tiger, and so on. The building itself is completed back in 1989, designed by an Irishman named Kevin Roach.
Oh, that's the restaurant.
And it's a postmodern building in that it's trying to pick up references to the city of Chicago and the structure of the building. Our very first tall buildings, our very first skyscrapers were designed so they were divided into three parts: a base, a shaft, and a decorative top. So that building, in terms of its three-part organization, is picking up a bit of the history of tall, high-rise buildings here in downtown Chicago. So postmodernism, as opposed to being built anywhere and always looking the same way the international style was, postmodernism is more specific to its site, what we call contextual. Another characteristic of postmodernism is that it began using classical ornament again. So if you look again to your left-hand side, you'll see a mirrored glass building that has white stone trim. If you look all the way to the top, it has a triangular top, and you can see the words United. This is the headquarters for the holding company that owns United Airlines. The building's completed back in 1992, designed by a Spaniard, a man named Ricardo Bofill. And he likes to combine the modern, it looks like a giant chair. Notice those bands of the light-colored stone going up between the long, narrow windows. The windows are recessed visually, so you get a very strong vertical emphasis. This building is what we call in the throne style. The seat of the throne is where the flag is. The back is where the center tower is. This style of building, that format, came about because Chicago changed its city codes, building codes, in 1923. There was a height limit until 1923. Buildings could be no taller than about 220 feet. The height of those corners on the LaSalle Wacker building. But after 23, developers could put towers on their buildings, but the towers had to sit back away from things, that kind of thing. Typically they'd be at the top of the building, but because of that elevated train where you see the yellow trestle, at that time they thought it was not a good idea to have people looking directly into the elevated train, so they put the mechanicals there and then lifted the tenants just a bit above that. The blue glass building, which is next, is their third building. We'll get a better view of that when we come back, so I'll tell you about that later on in the cruise. We're at this point, we are going to turn and go up the North Branch. We'll go up to Goose Island, turn around, come back, and go into the South Branch, turn around, come back, and go out to the lake. So you get multiple opportunities to see all the buildings here along the river. Designed by Frank Abbott. Harry Weiss designed the conversion into a condominium building. That happened in 1981. If you can look where the balconies are, because these holes had to be punched into the building. You can see how deep the walls are. So if you like to really crank up the stereo, this is a good place for you. The 4-foot thick walls, the 2-foot thick floors, great place. Notice there's a little place where you can tie up your boat. Some offices here at river level. Now just beyond the Fulton House, you'll see these triangular shaped cottages. These are river cottages. They are from 1988, also designed by Harry Weiss, who designed the conversion of Fulton House. There are 4 here, 2 are 6 stories, 2 are 4 stories. Notice all the triangular shapes. Presumably, Harry said he was making a tribute to the triangular shape of a sailboat here for these cottages right along the river. There are 2 marinas, again, where you can tie up your boat when you're not using it.
Oh, a wedding!
Oddly enough, a lot of newlyweds have their picture taken here.
That's funny.
So we just passed under the Kinsey Street Bridge. And now I want you to compare the 2 sides of the river, because we're now on the North Branch. So we're going to start over here on your left-hand side where all the trees are. As you can see, this is a residential development. There's a high-rise tower by Nagel Hartree, and then these red brick buildings, we're having a little bit of work here, are by Papa George Hames. The whole complex is from 2005. It's called Kinsey Park, named after the street. Notice we have a nice river walk where that gentleman is standing in the purple shirt. Terraces, balconies, you can really enjoy being along the river here. Now, compare that to your right-hand side. This somewhat looks like a giant warehouse. This is the East Bank Club. This is this is Chicago's biggest health club. This is where Chicago's trendy set sweats. President Obama has been a member here, Oprah Winfrey. Notice the windows. They're really there just to let in light, because this building is from 1979. And the designers here, Gordon and Levin in 1979, pretty much didn't want the people in the building looking at the river, because the river wasn't very attractive in 1979, often didn't smell very good. But notice what's at the end of the East Bank Club. We have a high-rise tower. This is, again, a rental building. It's called Kingsbury Plaza, completed back in 2008. Designed by Solomon, Cordwell, and Benz. Now, it's a rental building, so guess which units are the most expensive to rent?
On top, of course.
And if you're thinking these big bay windows overlooking the river, you are right. So in 1979, when the East Bank Club was built, the idea was to turn your back on the river, pretend your building wasn't on the river. 2008, about, what is that, 30 years later, we charge you extra to look at the river. So that pretty much shows you how our attitude toward the river did a 180-degree turn from the late 1970s up until the early 2000s. As I mentioned, this was originally an industrial area, so we have memories of the old industrial past here. Going back on your right-hand side, after the bridge, you see a red brick building with metal balconies. This was originally a warehouse. It was a warehouse for a railroad company. It was completed in 1909, designed by Nimitz and Fellows. Obviously, it's not a warehouse today. It was converted into a residential building in 1995 by Fitzgerald Associates. This is what we call repurposing, adaptive reuse, where an older building is given a new life. Typically, an old warehouse or an old factory will be gutted and turned into a residential building. And metal hanging balconies are usually a dead giveaway that that's happened to an older building. The red brick garage is new, but they use similar red brick to the old red brick warehouse to blend the old and the new.